As I ring the Tibetan bowl this morning, let the sound surround you. Relax as it slowly fades away, and give thanks that each of us is a part of the connective tissue that holds both the legacy and the future of our faith. Well, that'll get us going this morning. Thank you, Michael. Good morning and welcome, members, friends, visitors, those of you joining us on Zoom this morning. We're the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. We come together as an intentional community, gathered around our mission to support each other's individual spiritual journeys and to inspire, inform, and support all who seek a more equal and just community. And we're pleased that you're all with us here this morning. I'm Nancy Holland, co-leading this morning with Joan Cavano, and we're pleased to welcome Reverend Greg Shute back to our pulpit for his reflection on recovering our Universalist roots. You'll remember, I hope in March, Greg was here and spoke about the Unitarian heritage. So thank you from Michael and your music, the piano, John and back on tech, Harry Hart for the beautiful flowers this morning, and all the other volunteers noted in your order of service who make this and every Sunday morning possible. We're very grateful for you. I have a series of announcements. We're in need of coffee hosts and greeters. Please sign up on the whiteboard in the lobby. Greeting is a particularly good way for new people to meet some of the rest of the congregation, and it's pretty simple. You just stand there and hang out, hand out the program, the order of service. So don't be shy and think about signing up. We also need a potluck host for May 16th, I think it is, yeah. So if anybody be interested in hosting that, you can do it here at the church and or in your home if you prefer. Find a partner. It's fun to do with two people. All you really need to do is kind of set things up ahead of time, plates and tables and all, and it's a potluck, so everybody brings the food and beverage, so there's no work there. So consider that if you're interested. Also a reminder that next Sunday is our flower communion service. So for, a lot of you are new to our church, and we welcome you here. At flower communion, we ask everyone to bring a flower. Could be something from your garden, could be something blooming wild by the roadside. It doesn't matter. We collect them all together, and at the end of the service, everybody takes a different flower. And so please mark your calendar and bring your flower next week. And also the summer discussion schedule is up on the whiteboard. Again, for those who might be new, the end of May will be our last formal church service. And in June and July and August, we have informal summer discussions led by those of you and us, the members of the congregation. Topic of your choice that you'd like to share or discuss with the group. So please sign up, and if you have other questions, speak to me or anyone else on the worship committee. Okay, and now Joan is going to read the words in your order of service. They're new this morning, as I like the chalice.
And I think the idea is we all say them together. So as we light the chalice this morning, the Spirit of the Holy dwells in each of us. The Spirit of love dwells in each of us. May this flame remind us that eternal love dwells in our hearts. May this flame remind us that the Spirit of life dwells among us as we gather as a faith community. May this flame remind us that the arc of the universe needs our embodied love and faith to bend toward justice.
And now rise in body or spirit as we sing our first hymn this morning. It's number 166 in your, I think we know Blue Boat. It's 166 in your gray hymnal. It's called Years Are Coming, but the words are by Aidan Ballou. Some of you have heard of Hosea Ballou, who was a Universalist minister in the early 1800s. Aidan was his cousin, and he wrote the words to this hymn. And the melody is the same as Blue Boat Home, which we know from our teal hymnal. So that's sort of interesting. Our opening words this morning are from Ella Boyer, who says, "Some believe we're here for a greater purpose. Others hold fast to a claim of complete coincidence. Others still lie somewhere in between. There are so many differences and barriers between each individual. It would seem at times as though the odds were stacked against us becoming one whole. As we believe such different things, live and experience such different things, value and hate such different things. We are the children of God, the children of the earth, or fully grown adults here as a piece of the ongoing cycles of the universe, the children of the stars. We all have different definitions and explanations to who or what and why we are. Perhaps all are right. Our revelation is not sealed. Despite all that is different, there is one thing that is certainly the same. Somehow, we are all right here, right now. We are growing and changing and discovering, all here, all together, sharing the same sacred space we have shared for years, even generations. Constantly evolving, constantly changing. Let us continue. Let us change and fight together. Let us adapt together. Let us grow together. Let us worship together. And now Joan will lead us in a responsive reading.
Thanks, Nancy. So you'll see in the insert, we have a reading from Thomas Merton, one of my favorite philosophers and thinkers. Why don't we do it as a responsive reading? I'll say the first line, you say the line in italics, and then we'll say the final two together. We are living in the greatest revolution in history, a huge spontaneous upheaval of the entire human race. Not a revolution planned and carried out by any particular party, race, or nation, but a deep elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been. A revelation of the chaotic force. This is not something we have chosen, nor is it something we are free to avoid. Okay. Next is a special time we save for sharing what we hold deeply in our hearts, be they joys or worries. We may share them here. If you are joining us by Zoom this morning, please raise your hand or unmute to share what is in your heart. Those of you here in person, please come forward to the microphone and I will light the candle for you. Nancy.
I have a joy. My oldest granddaughter, has applied to graduate school for an MBA program, and she's decided on the University of Texas at Austin, and she'll begin that program in August and a sort of a whole new phase of her life. So I'm very excited for her.
So just a reflection or a comment, bit of sorrow, I guess, but thought it bore mention the passing of the Pope. You know, that's a significant change coming, quite likely. But he was a man, at least to me, I'm not Catholic, but he appeared to be very open and welcoming for the poor and the underprivileged. And sorry to see that pass, and hopefully the Cardinals will find somebody to replace him that carries some of those thoughts forth.
Who am I to judge?
Anyone else? Okay. For the joys and concerns today that were spoken, as well as those that remain in our hearts, let us take a moment of silence. Blessed be. This week, our offering will be taken to support the work of Shore Rivers. If you're putting a pledge check in the basket, please be sure that the word pledge is written in the lower left-hand spot there for messages. And now Paula Hubbard from the Social Justice Committee will tell us a bit about Shore Rivers. And just to remind you all, after the service today, there'll be a luncheon for those who wish to stay and listen to our speaker, Paul Shakrov, talk about the theme of related to Earth Day this week. And here comes Paula.
Yeah, Shore Rivers is an organization that essentially watches over the rivers of the Eastern Shore. It involves the river keepers, on the Sassafras, the Chester, the Wye, and the Choptank. And this is an organization that has formed a corporation, and they do absolutely wonderful work environmentally. They are a local group. They sponsor all the river quality, water quality monitoring, and they also do a lot of habitat projects for near shore. And there's a couple of flyers out on the table that you can take a look at. But they really focus on things like sustainable yards. Let's get rid of the monoculture grass all the way down to the water's edge. They work to mitigate farm runoff and do everything possible to keep the rivers clean. They have a lot of volunteer activities. So if you have a chance, go on their website, just look up Shore Rivers, and it will take you to their website and all of the things that they do.
Thank you, Paula. Now we'll take the collection. Thank you, Michael. That was lovely. Music to give by. And now Reverend Greg Shute will join us, will lead us in his reading.
Change of plans.
Oh, you're going to do the reading? Okay. Nancy Holland will do.
Little change of plans here. Okay, our reading is, I will read it, but it's in the back of your hymnal, number 657, if you want to read along. And this reading is from, wait a minute. Okay. Okay, sorry. Little ditch there. 569, okay. I reversed my digits, huh? Okay. Sorry, so this reading is called Stand by Your Faith, and it's from Olympia Brown, who some of you may recollect as the first woman to be ordained as a minister in this country at all, and she was ordained as a Universalist minister in 1863. And she says, "Stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it. There is nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before us the loftiest ideals, which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message. that you are strong enough to work for a great true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of those truths and new enjoyments in their contemplations, always trusting in the one God which ever lives and loves. And now Greg will give us his reflection on recovering our Universalist roots.
Thanks, Nancy and Joan. Many of you may recall last month I talked about Unitarianism and used a book called The Epic of Unitarianism, which I do recommend. It's required reading for fellowship ministers in the UUA. And today I'm going to read from Universalism in America by Ernest Cassara. And I would recommend this book too for any of you who might be interested. It's full of documents from the Universalist tradition, which are very hard to read because so many of them are written in the 19th century, and so the language is kind of archaic. But they reveal a lot. But I want to start off by just reading the first page. And he writes, Universalism arose in America in a time of political and intellectual ferment. A series of misunderstandings and confrontations between Great Britain and her colonies in North America was escalating to the point where it would become impossible for trust to be reestablished. The Americans were achieving an identity of their own and were not willing to continue a relationship which they conceived of as exploitive and repressive. The rebelliousness which was to lead to the War of Independence manifested itself in other areas of American life, not the least of which was theological. In a nation addicted to formulating and reformulating theological ideas, it was inevitable that theology should come to grips with changing times. Western man's very understanding of the universe was undergoing radical change as the Ptolemaic worldview, which had provided the comfort of reassurance that the earth and man were the center of the universe and necessarily the center of God's attention, gave way to the Copernican view, with its demonstration that the earth was but one of many planets spinning in a space so vast that it was beyond comprehending. God was now the grand superintendent of a mechanism so huge and complex that many found it increasingly difficult to believe that the activities of man on earth were such as to demand the deity's full attention. And he's referring there of the shift from theism to deism, this notion that God was still in charge, God was still there, but God was not in the minutia of day-to-day management, but took a more large and long-term, wider view. And it's important to understand that initial shift because for the longest time, the Christian faith was based on this whole notion of hell and damnation. I'm sure that many of you have seen pictures of the fresco in the Sistine Chapel on the back wall called the Final Last Judgment. And in that picture, you see a whole bunch of people rising up to heaven and to be reunited with God. And you also see a whole bunch of people sinking down to be endlessly and eternally devoured by these ghastly demons there. And that was the theology of the church. There was this notion that there was going to be everlasting retribution for all of your sins, and that human beings were actively and consistently sinful. That was our very nature. And it became a little bit of a problem for a lot of people who had a hard time reconciling that notion with their own mortality. And so Universalism arrives essentially in the United States well, actually in the colonies in 1770, in the person of John Murray, who was stranded off the coast of New Jersey. He was coming over from England. He had been a very unsuccessful businessman. He had gone into bankruptcy a number of times. He had spent some time in debtor's prison. His home had burned, and his wife and his son had died in that tragedy. And he'd left England because he was so devastated by this whole notion and this idea that his question in his own mind, will I ever see my family again? Will I be reunited in heaven with them, or will I be in hell? And that was a real problem from him, and he decided that that was the kind of God and that kind of a system that he could not accept. And so he began to shift his thinking to this notion of universal salvation, universal return and reunion with God, and rejected this whole notion of hell and damnation, and instead realized that, yes, he would eventually be reunited with his wife and his son. And so in 1770, well, actually, September 30th, 1770, he preached Universalism for the first time in New Jersey, in a place called Good Hope, New Jersey, Good Luck, New Jersey. And he was so successful that he traveled around. He was called upon by many of the parish churches to be a guest speaker, because there were people who really were yearning for that message and thinking similarly that, there needs to be something better here. And so he traveled around, and in 1774, he established the first Universalist Church of America in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And shortly thereafter, he sent a resolution to the Massachusetts State Council, or government, whatever it was. At that time, of course, part of your taxes went to support the parish church, whatever that parish church was. And he felt that the Universalist Church of Gloucester was significantly different than the parish church in Gloucester, and that his taxes ought not to be applied to that parish church in Gloucester. And that instead, that those people who went to the first Universalist church in Gloucester ought to be exempt of that portion of taxes that goes to the parish church, and that they should therefore be supporting the Universalist Church of America in Gloucester. And the Massachusetts legislature agreed and decided there ought to be a separation of church and state, and that churches should be independent of and responsible for their own economic and financial security. So although we tend to often think of Jefferson and Virginia as being the start of this idea of separation of church and state, it actually started in the first Universalist church in Gloucester. And so then there began to be an increasing number of ministers, itinerant ministers, who moved around a lot and spoke from time to time. And they decided, we need to get together and create an organization. So they called a convention in Philadelphia in 1790. And they came up in 1803 with a profession called the Winchester profession in Winchester. And I want to read to you the statement of the Winchester profession of 1803. We believe the scriptures of the Old and New Testament to contain a revelation of the perfection and will of God and the rule of faith and practice. 2, we believe in one God, infinite in all his perfection, and that these perfections are all modifications of infinite, adorable, incomprehensible, and unchangeable love. 3, we believe that there is one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. Note, the man Christ Jesus. in whom dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, who by giving himself a ransom for all hath redeemed them to God by his blood, and who, by the merit of his death and the efficacy of his Spirit, will finally restore the whole human race to happiness. And we believe in the Holy Ghost, whose office is to make known to sinners the truth of their salvation. And we believe in the obligation of the moral law as the rule of life. And we hold that the love of God manifested in the Redeemer is the best means of producing obedience to that law and promoting a holy, active, and useful life. Now, I wanted to stick that in there because that's language we're very uncomfortable with in our Unitarian and Universalist congregations. There's a lot of God word in there. And a lot of us have a lot of problem with that, which is really the whole point of my wanting to emphasize universalism. Because whereas Unitarianism moves in a anti-power and control, anti-authoritarian sort of way, a freedom of the individual and personal authority and all that kind of reaction to dogma, the Universalists really embrace the notion of the Christian God and the brotherhood of Jesus and the structure that gives them in their lives. And so it's something that I think that we've lost when we tend to just dismiss universalism. Shortly after that notion, there was a document published by a man by the name of Thomas Whittemore, who writes, "It cannot be denied that the advocates of universalism are mostly to be found in that class of people which the Bible denominates wicked, while nearly all the wise and good adopt the contrary belief. The intemperate, the thief, the robber, the profane swearer, the murderer, the corrupt, and the dissolute are generally pleased with the preaching of Universalists. But the pious and the better portion of community deprecate the influence of such preaching. I like the society of the wise and the good better than that of thieves and drunkards and Universalists." There was a real significant controversy going on within these United States in the early 19th century, because essentially what that people like him were saying is, if you take away final judgment, if you take away the threat of hell, how do you get moral and loving and gentle and kind people if you don't use fear to influence their behaviors? Well, then we have this thing called the Treatise on Atonement, written in 1805 by Hosea Ballou. It's a long document, and I'm not going to read it to you. It's a horrible document. But what he essentially says is, God is not like that. God is loving and gentle and warm, and God loves us, and God wills us into his life. Atonement being that becoming one with God. And he spends a lot of time arguing about sin and maintaining, well, his argument is that anything that any of us do on earth is finite because it has a beginning and an end. And so if our sin is finite, then our salvation after death cannot be connected with a finite experience on earth. Our life after death, our salvation is infinite, as is God infinite. So it can't be sin that determines where we spend our life after life, our salvation. It has to be that we are reunited with that loving God that we believe in. And it's kind of an interesting argument, because here again, we Unitarians and Universalists we don't talk about sin. And we don't talk about salvation, and we don't talk about life after life. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff in the Universalist heritage that is lost to us. I'm not advocating that we need to believe in any of this. I'm just saying that there's a whole thought process and a legacy here that leads us into who we are today. And I think it's something that we can hang on to. And it's interesting to watch its evolution over time, because of a man by the name of Abner Neeland in, I'm not sure what the date is on this, 1833, which is the rise of transcendentalism, and if you follow Emerson and Thoreau and all. But Abner Neeland, a Universalist, welcomes this new Copernican rather than Ptolemaic vision of the world. And he writes, "I believe in the existence of a universe of suns and planets, among which there is one sun belonging to our planetary system, and that other suns, being more remote, are called stars, but that they are indeed suns to other planetary systems. I believe that the whole universe is nature, and that the word nature embraces the whole universe, and that God and nature, so far as we can attach any rational idea to either, are perfectly synonymous terms. Hence, I am not an atheist, but a pantheist. That is, instead of believing there is no God, I believe that in the abstract all and everything is God, and that all power that is in God, and that there is no power except that which proceeds from God. I believe that there can be no will or intelligence where there is no sense, and no sense where there are no organs of sense, and hence sense, will, and intelligence is the effect and not the cause of organization. I believe in all that logically results from these premises, whether good, bad, or indifferent." That's a very philosophical perspective, but there again, he keeps using that God word. Yeah, we're going to talk, Harry. And Clarence Skinner in 1915, "Universalists are free men. Therefore, they should be in the front rank of the daring few who are fighting the battles of social emancipation. They have pledged themselves to break the tyrannies of the mind and to strike the shackles of tradition from the soul. If they are true to the spirit of their faith, they pledge themselves to free humanity from the economic degradation which fetters it, body, mind, and soul in the 20th century. The logic is relentless and the implication is clear. Universalism, by its very genius, is led into the great social maelstrom because it is essentially a battle for the freedom of the common man. It is a struggle for complete emancipation. All great social problems involve theological conceptions. We may divorce church from state, but we cannot separate the idea of God from the political life of the people. So intimate is the connection between religious and social development that the history of tribal and national evolution reveals the fact that a particular type of theology is an almost inevitable concomitant to a particular type of society. Social action, the commitment to building and creating a better, more loving and accepting and inclusive community. The General Convention in 1917 rewrote the Winchester Profession. The Universalist Church recognizes the fact that no individual and no nation can live a completely effective Christian life in an anti-Christian social order. We therefore declare the primal task of the Church of today to be the reconstruction of the world's civilization in terms of justice, peace, and righteousness, so that the spiritual life of all may develop in its fullest capacity. And then it goes on and lists a number of things, but down at the bottom it says, democracy, in order to be complete, must be economic and social as well as political. We therefore declare for the democratization of industry and of land and for the establishment of cooperation. Through all the agencies of the church, we shall endeavor to educate and inspire the community and the nation to a keener social consciousness and a truer vision of the kingdom of God on earth. E.B. Fisher, 1929. Universalists are often asked to tell where they stand. The only true answer to give to this question is that we do not stand at all, we move. Or we are asked to state our position, and again we can only answer that we are not staying to defend any position, we are on the march. No Protestant church today can tell where it stands or what position it will defend in the future. The Board of Fellowship in 1933. The bond of fellowship in this convention shall be a common purpose to do the will of God as Jesus revealed it, and to cooperate in establishing the kingdom for which he lived and died. Robert Cummings, 1942. Universalism cannot be limited to Protestantism or to Christianity, not without denying its very name. Ours is a world fellowship, not just a Christian sect. For so long as universalism is universalism and not partialism, the fellowship bearing its name must succeed in making it unmistakably clear that all are welcome, theist and humanist, Unitarian and Trinitarian, colored and colorless. A circumscribed universalism is unthinkable. So that's what I have to say about universalism. And I think that if we focus on it a little bit, it raises a number of questions to my mind about the nature of God. As I've mentioned many times, I essentially am a non-theist, not an atheist, but I am a non-theist. But the whole notion of God in terms of the total entity that is nature and everything in the world, that larger vision that one of those writers mentions in there. It asks us to consider our relationship with that larger universe of which we are a part, whatever word we might choose to use. But it asks us to assess that and to think about our relationship and our responsibilities that go with it. And so this notion of sin then, in terms of when we fall short of that, I've often done a sermon on sin, the 7 deadly sins, which I think can be reduced to one. There really is only one sin, and that is entitlement. If you think about that for a minute, that's the basis of most every time when we transgress, we have a sense of entitlement. And so to think in terms of the broader community, of the universal community and our relationship with all of us, and how often maybe we don't like to use the word sin, but step outside and miss the mark. So that universalism offers us this notion to think about our relationship in the universe with the larger universe, with existence, and our responsibility and how we accept our place in it. And so that's slightly different than the Unitarian approach, I think, which often is one of rejecting authority and saying you and we are each and all responsible for our own means of finding purpose and meaning in life. And that's true, I agree. But it doesn't offer any questions about our conclusions that I think universalism can prod us with. There's a wonderful little statement that you often hear at General Assembly when people talk about Unitarians and Universalists, that Universalists think that God is too good to damn them, and Unitarians think they're too good to be damned anyways. And so there's that dichotomy in there, because the one says that we're inherently good, and that's true. But the other one says, but what is our relationship with that larger entity, whatever it is? So I would like to know your thoughts and opinions about that. Anything that you've been mulling over as I've been rambling on. Distinguishing between the Universalists and Unitarians. And as I had started last month by saying, I think it's a shame, downright shame, in 1962 when they came up with Unitarian Universalism. The association, instead of, the Unitarian Universalist Association, instead of coming up with the Association of Unitarians and Universalists, which would make us a two-dimensional rather than abstract, impossible to define, one-dimensional denomination. Thoughts? Comments?
So why in 1962 did they combine the two? I'm just curious why in 1962 the Unitarians and Universalists joined.
I can tell you that. Money. The Universalists had a lot of money, the Unitarians had none. They were more Unitarians. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and Unitarian was a household word in the 50s and 60s. The Arlington Street Church on the corner of Boston Garden in Boston took in draft dodgers who claimed sanctuary. This was in the early 60s. And it made the cover of Time magazine when the FBI stormed the church. And Unitarians were known across the country for taking stands, demonstrating time and time again against the war, and just everywhere's. The Universalists, and they were, Emerson had a church in Concord, but at first he had one in Boston. And so the churches in Boston were, many of them were very, very affluent in the early part of the 19th century. But what happened was Unitarians became very disorganized. At some point, most Unitarians decide they don't need a church anymore, right? And they go somewhere else. Universalists, their history was itinerant preachers. And so they would move around and they would have these very charismatic preachers, such as Murray, who would go from town to town and just preach. And they would get together annually to do these Winchester professions and these things to, these statements of their beliefs. But they didn't have the same structure as the Unitarians with Emerson and his cohorts had. So by middle of by 1962, the Unitarians had become disorganized, and although they had a number of churches, they were fairly empty. Whereas Universalism had very few churches, but they had an amount of money. And if you've ever go to New England and go, well, I grew up in a little town called Needham right outside Boston, and there's a common, and at the top of the common is the First Parish Church, founded in 1711. It's Unitarian. Down the street is the Second Parish Church, Congregational. And then you get everybody else that shows up, the Methodists and everybody. But if you go from town to town, you'll still see, you can walk into a church which is affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Association, and you can tell which one it is. The church that we belong to in Franklin was the first Universalist Society of Franklin, and it looked very different from a Unitarian church. My good friend Susan in Winchester, from Winchester Profession, it was a Universalist church, and it looked like I don't know what to say, an Episcopal church or something, very different. The Unitarian churches tend to look more like Quaker Meeting, and Universalist churches look more like, I don't know, Episcopal churches or something. And in New England, you have they had, after 62, they had a number of conversations, and the First Universalist Society of Franklin is still the First Universalist Society of Franklin, affiliated with the UUA. First Parish Church in Needham is still the first parish affiliated with the UUA. And what you get around here is you get things like Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River, Unitarian Universalists Fellowship of Newark, Unitarian Universalists of Central Delaware. And so, not everybody, the vast majority of congregations that come out of after 62 or so have changed their names or never had the other names. Whereas the original churches in New England, they still differentiate between Unitarian and Universalist. And the ministers they call are different. And I think that that's really a shame that we tend to think that we can't, that we have to make one thing out of it. So does that sort of answer your question?
I think one more comment or question, then we need to move on.
Okay.
And we can take conversation to coffee.
Very quick, you said congregational. Does that equate in your mind with universalist?
No, by congregational, I mean what more recently has become UCC, United Church of Christ. The congregational church was really called a congregational church just because of their polity, in that they're organized individually rather than by bishops and. Right.
Oh, I was just rubbing.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I think, yeah, can we share a conversation over coffee, continue this discussion? Thank you, Greg. Okay, so in your order of service, in the insert on the back, we have the words to the song "We Are the World" from back in the 80s, Africa USA fundraiser, right, for Africa. Let Michael play "Rise in As You Will" in body or spirit, and we'll see how we do with this. There come a time when we heed a certain call, when the world must come together. We are the children, we're the ones who make a brighter day, so let's start giving. There's a choice we're making, we're saving our lives. It's true, we'll make a day just for you and me. When we're down and out, there seems no hope at all. But if you just believe, there's nowhere we can fail. Let's realize that a change can only come when we stand together as one. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day, so let's start giving. There's a choice we're making. We're saying our own words. It's true, we'll make a better day just for you and me. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day, so let's start giving. There's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. So our closing words today are from the Universalist minister John Murray, who said, "Go out into the highways and byways. Give the people something of your new vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it, let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God." And now we'll extinguish the chalice. The words are in your order of service. Do you want to do the flame? Okay. As we extinguish this flame, let us take courage. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Let us take courage, for deep down there is another truth. We are not alone. Till after. So reminder that for those who can stay for the discussion of social justice, environmental discussion after, there is lunch. Otherwise, there's coffee and more conversation in the lobby. And please go forth and have a lovely week.